Welcome to Stitching Up Trouble, a podcast where a quilt retreat owner and a creative quilt designer cross paths and stitch up some trouble together. I am Mary, owner of Coosa Mountain Lodge.
And I'm Heidi Pridemore of the Whimsical Workshop. Hope you enjoy. Hey, Mary, welcome back. How are you?
Hey, Heidi, I'm good. How are you?
Good. It's a quiet Sunday. I'll take that.
Oh, yay. I love quiet Sundays. Yeah, pretty quiet here too.
Oh,
Pretty
that's
quiet.
good. Yeah.
So.
It's been a very long spring. I can't believe we're already in the middle of May here.
I know.
Yeah.
I know.
Last time I looked, it was January. I don't know where the time goes, but
Yeah,
anyway.
it goes pretty quickly.
Yeah. So what have you been working on?
So I am working on some client quilts today. I have both of my quilters running. I paused them so that we could record this without a lot of noise in the background. Working on that. And then I am also working on covering some ironing boards,
Oh.
making some ironing boards for the new retreat.
Mm-hmm.
I have the boards and the Insul Bright and got my little staple gun out. So I'm working on that.
That'll be fun.
And then I have a trip coming up, so I am going to kind of go through my hand sewing projects and make sure I have the, extra needles and thread and scissors in there and, things like that. So kind of making sure that my project bags are in order. So.
Well, thanks for reminding me that. I'll put that on my to-do list because I've got quite a few trips coming up too. It's always for me, it's like which project gets touched this trip,
Yeah.
I've got some that have been going like you that travel trip to trip to trip, and they're the projects I need to do versus the projects I want to do, and
yeah. And then I have a really bad habit of just like, oh, it's time to go, just shove everything in this bag. So I have like my phone charger in one of my project bags that I took along on my last trip that I've got to find. Just.
Oh, you are bad. I am so orderly when I pack and travel. My chargers always go back in the same place because I know if I've gotten there one time without a charger and it was like the middle of nowhere. It was a pain to get a charger. So
no, I am really bad. And so I go back and forth between the lodge and home a lot, and then I'm traveling. So like we came up to the lodge yesterday and I came up with 4 different bags of stuff. So my clothes that I'm using this weekend, but then I didn't unpack my suitcase because I had just gotten home from a trip. So that came with me, and I'm going to do the laundry up here. And then I had my travel bag with my computer and the one notebook that I traveled with and the project. So that came along, but then like my regular bag with my other notebooks and my other project. So that came along. And so
I just won't look at your luggage. It'll make me crazy. I won't look at your luggage. It'll make me crazy.
Yeah, it will. Yeah. So that all needs to be cleaned up. And so that's my project, is to just kind of to do my luggage reset, I guess,
that's a project. That for me is like a whole day. Like I need a whole day just to get myself reorganized. And I'm well overdue. Our winter clothes are still in the front and it's like 90 degrees here. I got to like do that kind of stuff. So, well, I have actually taken time in the evenings and been working on my one needlepoint project that I started years ago.
Really?
Yeah. So, and this is a gift to myself because I very rarely take time to do whatever I want. But every night I've decided, until work forces me to not do it, I get to have an hour or two just to sit and work on that. So I've been working on my needlepoint, which has been so relaxing and fun. And
great. Yeah. That's good.
And then work is work. That's what I've been doing. Work.
Yeah. Well, that's all right.
Yeah.
That's all right.
So what are we going to talk about today?
So today, I thought it would be a good idea to kind of go back to basics and go to the beginning and kind of highlight some of the basic skills that it's a good idea to practice or master
Mhm.
or improve upon that will improve your overall um, quilting abilities.
Mhm.
So, what made me think of it is I have just recently seen a great improvement in my piecing, um, that my accuracy, and it was because I slowed my machine down
Mhm.
and I'm stitching slower, which
Yeah.
if
It's hard.
anybody, it's so hard because I
Mhm.
just like to just zoom and get it, get it
Right.
done.
Right.
But a friend of mine started teaching some of us how to do foundation piece like miniatures.
Mhm.
So I
Mhm.
actually made a pair of foundation pieced earrings for Stacy for
I saw
Christmas.
them. They were beautiful.
And they were really, really fun to make, but I had to like put my machine on the slowest setting
Mhm.
and very carefully
Yeah.
stitch on the line, like
Yeah.
one stitch at a time.
Yeah.
And um, so then after that, I bumped up my speed a little bit, but I didn't bump it back all the way to the fastest my machine can go. And
Mhm.
I stayed kind of about half speed.
Mhm.
And I definitely noticed that my accuracy was much better.
Yeah.
Um, so it kind of got me thinking like, okay, I've been doing things this way. I've been quilting
Mhm.
for 15 years or so. I've been doing things this way for a long time. There's always room for improvement. There's always room to learn a
Mhm.
new way of doing things. And so I thought we would just have a chat about, just
Mhm.
a few things that we could do to improve our skills.
Yeah.
So I have a list of things that I think would be skills that you should,
Mhm.
maybe concentrate on it, I mean, and take all of these with a grain of salt. You they're your quilts, they're your projects. You do them the
Mhm.
way that makes you happy. Um, but I always like to learn and improve. I don't need to be perfect. I don't, but I like to learn. I like to, try
Yeah.
new things. And if if I can improve without too much effort, then it just makes sense to do that. And
Yeah.
then some of the techniques I try and I'm like, yeah, that's way too much work. I'm not doing it. I don't care if this lines up right or
Yeah.
not. So
Oh, and
so take
I
it.
have a good point on that one. I always go back around. Like there are a lot of techniques when I first started. I was like, this takes way too much time. I'm not ever going to do this again. A
Hmm.
foundation paper piecing being one of them. But
Hmm.
when you come back around after have sewn for a little while and you go back, you're like, actually, I don't mind that it takes longer. I'm okay slowing down a little bit because I'm getting a different thing. So
Yeah.
revisit. Okay, so I have your list. I didn't actually make a list because mine is mostly your stuff, but I'm sure I'll interject as we go because something will hit. Um, but
Well, these are the skills that I think are important,
mhm.
and maybe you can give us an idea of how to improve those skills.
Oh, that would work even better because
Yeah.
everything on here definitely will make you a better quilter, and it's sometimes just a small adjustment that'll have big
Right.
results. So yeah,
Right.
that would
Right.
work.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we're
So
talking on
my
the fly, girls and boys. We're just trying to figure out what we're talking about.
so
Okay, so what's
I
the
will
first
tell you
one?
what I think is important, and then you can tell me how to do it.
Oh, okay. Let's try this.
So, my first one is pressing versus ironing.
Mhm.
Um, I tend to be a lazy quilter and not want to press in
Mhm.
between. Um,
Mm.
like I'll sew all my blocks
Mhm.
together and then sew them into rows, and then I don't want to get up and press. I just want to keep sewing.
Mhm.
But yes, it does make a difference. And knowing how to do it correctly makes a big difference, especially if you're um, piecing, intricate blocks or
Mm-hmm.
if there's a lot of bias or
Yeah.
things like that. So there's definitely a pressing versus an ironing.
Mm-hmm. And you just touched on two different things. So, um, pressing versus ironing is one, and two is, do I really need to press every seam as I sew it? Two different things.
Okay.
So the quilt block itself will come out 1,000 times better if you press each seam. Finger pressing, iron pressing, that would work. Obviously, iron pressing is the best, but you need to get, when you put two pieces together, you need to get them to their finished size before you add a second piece or third piece. And the only way to get it to the finished size is to actually iron or press the seam. So to answer that question, invest in a table setting next to you if you don't want to get up and down. I sew standing up, so it's no big deal for me to walk over, but I will take shortcuts on almost anything, but pressing each seam is definitely important. And how you press seams is even more important, because if you press it and you press fabric into the seam, so we're going on to a separate topic here, like how to press.
Mhm.
If you are pressing from the back, so that's my biggest thing when I'm teaching. I see a bunch of people and they will press from the back, and there is no judgment here because we're all self-taught. Very few people go to
Mhm.
college to be a quilter. But you do want to press from the front. You want to press into the seam, and see, I don't press and I don't really iron. I do a combination. I never quite got the sit and the iron down. I was just like, well, you need to move that heat around. You need some movement to the iron. So what I actually do is I use the edge of the iron and I push it into the seam and then let it sit there for a second. And then I put it on top of the seam. But I push into the seam first and then on top. And I never ever tell people you can only press or iron. There are people who are never going to stop moving the iron. You just need to know
Mhm.
how you're doing it. So, yes, you need to press every seam. Press from the front. Use a
Okay.
nice hot iron. I don't recommend steam. And if we never get comments, we will get comments on that. And I don't recommend steam because steam will distort your fabric. It will make it flat and it'll distort it. But cotton has a memory. So if you've distorted it while you're making it flat and then you let it relax, it's just going to go back to where it was. So
Right.
I don't tend to do steam until the whole top is done. So,
Okay.
so that's how I approach ironing. So you're not wrong. You don't have to press. You can iron just slightly, and you
Okay.
should press after each seam.
Okay.
Does that help? I mean, you
It
already
does.
know how to do this, so people have to tell us if this is helping them.
Right. So my one little caveat is when you're ironing,
Hmm.
make sure you're not distorting your blocks.
Yes, and that brings
That's
up another point. You're right, because
yeah.
if you're doing triangles or bias or anything,
Right.
you need
Yep.
to be super delicate. And I always tell people, press the center of the seam and don't worry so much about either side. So say you sew two triangles together, I'd press in the center and gently go to the corner, but I don't always press the corners as much as they need until I get them into a more stable position.
Okay.
Just lightly
Yep.
press it. Don't kill it while it's a little piece. Kill it
Right.
when it's a whole block,
Right.
basically.
Right.
So, but that's a good point.
So
I forgot about that.
that so the steam and the distorting of your fabric
Hmm.
brings up a question in my head. Starch. Do you
I don't.
starch? Not to starch?
I don't use starch at all. I will use best press sometimes.
Okay.
I try not to ever add chemicals to the fabric because the fabric's already had sizing added to it. There's already a chemical added to the fabric. So I
Okay.
don't always know how things are going to react with that. And I just don't think it's a good idea to put chemicals into the quilt. So I don't use starch or magic sizing or any of that stuff. So, so,
All right.
but
Good to
that's a
know.
preference too, you
Yeah.
know. And if you use best press and it's going to be a gift, use the unscented stuff. Not everybody likes the same scent. So, and some people are actually allergic to scent. So if you do use anything like that, try not to get a scent caught into the quilt. So
that makes a lot of sense. Long arming for people, I have there are some quilts that I do that
mm-hmm.
they're really nice. You open them up and they smell so good, but that's because it's a scent that I like. And then sometimes, depending on what scent they've used, it's like, okay, here
Yeah,
we go.
yeah.
But yeah, that
So
is definitely a good thing to
yeah,
keep in mind.
yeah.
So
And remember, guys, this is just a quickie overview of our
yeah,
opinions on these techniques. So if you want like full blown tutorial videos, I do have some on my YouTube channel. There's tons of YouTube videos out there from other people, but this is just a quick overview.
yeah.
Yeah, just my little caveat, my legalese in there.
There you go. Yeah.
Okay.
So the next thing that I have done over the last year or so, maybe a little bit more, is changed my cutting technique.
Mm-hmm.
Um, my mom taught me how to cut, and she taught me using the grid on the cutting mat
Mm-hmm.
and not on the ruler.
Mm-hmm.
But mom was also ambidextrous, so she
Mm-hmm.
cut with either hand, whichever one
Mm-hmm.
worked out better for her.
Yeah.
So my cutting technique is not like really anybody else's,
Mm-hmm.
because my teacher was not like anybody else.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, um, but I have recently started using the stripology rulers. That gives me a
Mm-hmm.
much more accurate cut. I'm
Mm-hmm.
not using the grid on my cutting mat as
Mm-hmm.
much. I still sometimes do it depending on what I'm cutting.
Yeah.
And I have noticed that things are a lot more accurate
Yeah.
when I'm doing that. So, do you have any other tips for cutting?
Yeah, and I can explain why your cutting got better using rulers over the mat. So when they manufacture rulers, they are actually gauging the measurements on the rulers, making sure they're like 100% accurate, because, if it's not, then the ruler does not function as it's designed. For
Mhm.
cutting mats, if the grid is silk screened on, it can move, it can shift, the screen itself can stretch over time, and the cutting mat will function as a cutting mat whether it has measurements on it or not. So they're not as precise or worry as much about the accuracy of the grid on a cutting mat. So, and I learned fairly early on, it's like only use the grid on your cutting mat if you're doing something big. There's ways to do it with a ruler, but I too, like if I'm cutting a back of a pillow, I will use the grid on my mat, because the bigger the piece, the less accuracy is required. The smaller the piece, the more accurate you need to be. So definitely invest in good rulers that you can read, and make sure that your fabric that you are cutting, I know it's an extra step, and even I hate doing it, press it before you cut it, because you'd be amazed how many little wrinkles coming off the bolt, or it gets a crease or whatever. I always press it before I cut it. You're going to get more accurate pieces from your cutting. So, and cut with a very sharp blade, which we talked about tools in the other one, but your cutting will be much cleaner and more precise with a new blade in your cutter. So, um, I'd love to see how you were taught to cut, though. I guess you've already been cut every time I come. So, yeah, yeah. And the other thing is, make sure you have good light at your cutting table. Make sure that the table
Yeah.
is at the right height. If you're not comfortable while you're cutting, you're going to rush through it, and you're going to make, you may pull the fabric and not realize it. If the lighting is dark, you may not see. It's not aligned in the edge of the ruler. And like Mary said, use stripology rulers if you really struggle with going straight. There's die cutting ones you can do if you really don't like to cut. But yeah, there's definitely, the more accurate you are in every step, the more accurate your quilt will be at the very end. Now, this is coming, there's a scale of perfection from 1 to 10, and I'm probably a 6. Okay. Some people are 3s, some people's are 9s. You want to be as perfect as you want to be, if that makes sense. Like, it's not
Yeah.
rocket science. If it's off a hair, the world is not going to end.
Yeah. Yeah. There's the old galloping horse rule.
Mm-hmm.
If you can't see the
Mm-hmm.
mistake from the back of a galloping horse,
Yeah.
it's good enough.
You're not going to
So
appreciate it, but my favorite one is my quilter will fix it.
oh yeah, I love that one. I'm just gonna quilt the heck out of that. It'll be fine.
It'll be
Don't
fine.
worry about it.
Yeah. Little
Yeah.
bubble, she'll take care of it. So,
No problem.
yeah. So, yeah, there's a lot on cutting, how you hold the ruler, how you're doing it, but the overstrokes are, yeah. And go slower. Everything will get better if you go a little slower. So, but don't go
I'm
too
learning
slow.
that. I'm learning that. Yeah. Yeah.
All right. What's
So my
the
my next one is the 1/4 inch seam.
mm-hmm. Yeah.
So and there's I am doing better on my 1/4 inch accuracy,
Mm-hmm.
like I said, but just by slowing down.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a lot easier to control the machine when it's going half speed than
Mm-hmm.
when it's going full speed. So
Yeah.
I am working on that. People
Hey,
that
I
I've
am
gone to retreat
too. I
with,
like just in the last few years, I've turned the speed down on my sewing machine.
yeah, yeah,
The other thing that you may not realize is you're going through at top speed. Those machines are not really meant to go at top speed, and it will automatically pull it at the end because it doesn't have any material to grab, so it yanks it. So,
correct.
even though they give us the speed, it's the middle speed is probably the best speed to sew at.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
People that I've been at retreats with over the
mhm,
last few months have noticed
yeah,
that I have slowed down,
yeah.
you know.
Well, they
So
can hear.
they can, and they're used to just hearing my machine just
Yeah,
flying,
yeah,
and yeah. So I've had
yeah,
comments,
yeah.
but which is fine. So there's a lot of different gadgets out there for the 1/4 inch.
Hmm.
So that's one thing to explore.
Yeah.
The diagonal seam tape. There's a bunch of different
Hmm.
1/4 inch feet and guides and things like that. So
Well, and
improving.
one of my favorites in that regard. Now, I've been doing this for a very long time. My machine is set up with 1/4 inch tape, but then there is a little, it's called Q Tools Sewer's Edge. It's a little purple adhesive bump that I stick
Mhm,
right on that 1/4 inch line because if you are only counting on your 1/4 inch foot to get your 1/4 inch seam, by the time you get to the 1/4 inch foot, you're already too late to get yourself aligned to go through straight. So I am a big believer in having 1/4 inch line marked all the way across the throat of your plate or throat of your sewing machine. Have
mhm,
a little bumper the fabric hits up against. One, you can sew faster with those aids, but for
mhm.
the most part, if you don't have anything showing you the 1/4 inch except for your foot, by the time you're there, it's too late. You cannot correct it. So you need to have a gauge way before you hit the foot. The foot helps you line up all those tools, but I really am a strong believer in having more on your machine to make sure you're accurate because the 1/4 inch seam is that's the holy grail of quilting. Everybody wants a perfect 1/4 inch seam. And then we can do a whole thing about scant 1/4 inch, wide 1/4 inch. My machine doesn't always sew a 1/4 inch. Um, and the thing that I would say on that is if you sew the entire project on one machine using your 1/4 inch guides on that machine, everything should work out. You don't have to try to go scant or wide. Use the tool. Everything is consistent. That's more important than scant
Right.
because that makes me
Yes.
crazy in a pattern. Use a scant 1/4 inch. No, 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 no. There is a 1/4 inch. That is what we're going to use. So
Right. There's too much gray area with the
yeah,
scant.
and it's
So
like no, that you can't tell them to use a scant 1/4 inch unless you have a scant 1/4 inch foot. You
right.
there are tools designed for 1/4 inch. We can't deviate from the tools unless you give them new tools. That's kind of how
Right.
my
Yeah.
approach to it. But
That makes sense.
so
Okay.
yeah, so
Good.
1/4 inch is really, really important. And the other thing is
Yeah.
like I just did what was I doing? Oh, I was sewing with Minky. because I have a
Mhm.
Minky talk thing, and that's a 1/2 inch. And, I'm in a hurry. I was just like, I'm just gonna eyeball that 1/2 inch. It took me one
Mhm.
seam to realize that if I were to take 5 minutes, mark the 1/2 inch seam allowance all the way back on my plate, the whole project would go faster and would be more accurate. So,
Right.
even though I know I can eyeball it, it wasn't going to work. So if you're going to use
Yeah.
other seam allowances, take the time to mark those out as well, because it will make your life so much
Mhm.
easier. So, but
Good idea.
yeah.
Good idea.
What about you?
Good.
Do you have any tips on 1/4 inch other than slow down?
No, I
No?
don't.
Okay. Slow down, everybody.
Slow down.
Yeah, we all think that speed thing was there so we could teach kids to sew. No, no, it's for us. We need to slow it down.
Yeah. Yep. I'm learning. I'm
Yeah.
learning.
Yeah.
Um, so my next thing that I don't do very often, um, and I should probably revisit it because
Hmm.
the ladies that I quilt with that I admire their work and they do a really nice job, they pin a lot more than I do.
Hmm.
I don't pin very much.
Hmm.
Usually the only things that I pin are when I have my rows of blocks put together
Hmm.
and I have to join the 2 rows together,
Right.
I will pin those together.
Hmm.
But I typically don't pin. Um, if I'm working with something that's very tiny, I will glue.
Hmm.
And the like curved piecing, I will glue.
Hmm.
Um, but I don't pin a lot. And I think if I pinned more often and better, I would get more accurate results.
So this answer might surprise you. Not necessarily. So
Okay.
there are pinners and there are
Mhm.
non-pinners. Now there are certain things you should always pin. Always pin your borders. Anything over 12 inches, and it's a long strip of fabric, you pin it because the feed dogs go at a different speed than the foot. And if you don't have it pinned, you can end up with like an inch extra in your borders. So if you ever had a wavy border, you probably didn't pin it. Um, when it comes to piecing, though, if I have pieces that I have all my seams are going to nest, so they're all nesting within each other, and I
Mhm.
can go 3 inches and hit a seam, go 3 inches, hit a seam, I don't pin. I use
Okay.
the seam points and I sew, and then as I'm coming up to one, I align it and I hold it with my fingers and I sew up to that point. And I actually find my piecing is more accurate by doing that. One, it is forcing me to slow down because I have to align each one, but two, it lets
Mhm.
me help correct on the fly. So if I lay it
Oh,
out and it's already pretty much lined up and I don't have anything I have to ease in, I won't pin. The other thing about pinning is depending on where you put the pin, it can actually distort the seam and make it slide a little bit, and it's always going to be like a pin's length off. So I don't think pinning is a hard and fast rule. I think you have to decide. In your case, it sounds like you've already gone to the I don't pin every seam.
mhm.
And then there's other people that like they need the security of pinning. That's how they learned. That's what they're going to do. So for pinning, I think is very much a personal preference. So, but you also have to look at your piece when you're done. Pin one on the same project. Pin one, don't pin one.
Okay.
See if it actually does help you. But I've seen your work. Your work is beautiful. So I'm surprised to find out all these habits you have.
Oh yeah, I have terrible habits.
Well, you're a
Terrible
lot
habits.
like me. It's like, I mean, you go
Yeah.
fast. You want to get it
Yeah.
done. And
Yeah.
we don't slow down and actually, we do it slow the first time and then we're like, yeah, I got it. I'm going to just blow through this. But
Yeah. Yeah.
so yeah, and
So,
pinning will help you if things do not line up. That is when I will pin. When things are like,
okay.
I'm like, oh, that's a little bit off. Then I'll use some pins to hold my place.
Mhm.
And don't ever put the pin into the seam. Put it on either side.
Okay.
Okay. So, all right. I
There
feel
you
like
go.
I'm teaching a class here.
Well, you kind of are. So, so yeah, I learned a lot from my mom.
Yes.
She sewed for a very long time.
Hmm.
Started quilting at a little bit later date. But she kind of has had the same attitude that I have. Like, all
Yeah.
right, we can skip this step. Let's keep going.
Yeah.
Um, she would not even iron her bindings in half before she sewed them on.
I don't. I don't.
Like most people's heads are going to be like exploding, thinking that
Okay.
you don't
Now,
press that binding flat before you sew it on.
mine is because time is money. I'm being paid a certain
Right,
amount to do the quilt. And I have
right,
learned after doing 1,000+ bindings that I can finger press as I go, and I got it. And I do most of them by machine. Um, but every time I have students who try to emulate that, it twists on
yeah,
them.
yeah,
So not pressing the binding is not a good habit, but it can be done.
yes.
So no. And that's the thing. I learned, I worked at a quilt shop, and I was
Mhm.
29, and this was an amazing quilt shop. They had 8, 9 employees that were all specializing in something different. Like some people like foundation paper piecing, some liked hand applique, some liked fusible applique. And I was a sponge, and I just, I got 8 different perspectives on everything. And so, again, I'm self-taught like everybody else, but I
Right,
also have watched hundreds of people execute the same thing over and over, and I can see where um, things can trip people up. And
yeah,
these are really good. Pressing, the more you press, the better you press, or
hmm,
iron. I'm not going to say press or iron. The cutting, the more accurate you are with cutting, and then your 1/4 inch seam. If you can get the trifecta, if you can focus
right,
on each one and get all 3 where you're really good at it, then you can just start whipping quilts out and not struggle. But the
okay,
journey of quilting is learning how to perfect each one, or to become proficient at each one, so that
hmm,
your pieces will, because the more you do each of these, the easier your pieces are when they go together. So if you're one that all your puzzle pieces do not fit together ever, then one of these 3 things, or maybe 2 of these 3 things, are out of whack.
right,
So,
right, yeah,
but
yeah.
okay.
So, is there? So you said pressing, cutting, and the seam allowance are the trifecta.
Hmm.
Do you have any other skills that you would say, if you improved this basic skill, your quilting would improve overall?
Hmm. Making sure that your ruler doesn't slip when you cut. You
Okay.
know, take the time to make sure that when, I mean, that is cutting, but um, a lot of the things that I would suggest, like if you are perfecting those 3 things, um, you are going to have beautiful quilts. But things that can trip you up: a sewing machine that doesn't sew straight, poor lighting, poor tools, poor fabric. Not all fabric is created equal. And when I say poor fabric, I'm not actually saying cheap fabric versus high end fabric. I have dealt with some really high end fabric that is horrible to sew. And when the other thing, I just did a project, this brings it up. They gave me the fabric, it was from several different lines. And one of the fabrics was printed on a thick sheeting, a heavier sheeting, and one was on a really thin kind of drapey sheeting. That project was a nightmare because the one fabric was super rigid and the other one just wanted to be floppy and flop all over. So
Hmm.
when you are struggling with a piece, if it may not be your fault, it could be one of these other things, but you can
Right.
always get a better machine, hopefully, or make sure your machine, and it doesn't have to be more expensive. Just make sure it sews straight. Like when you let go of the piece and it's going through, does it veer off?
Right.
Easy way
Yeah.
to test it. Make sure you have really good lighting, because if you can't see what you're sewing, you're never going to sew it straight. Well, you will, but
Right.
it'd be total dumb luck you got it through. And the
Yeah.
the fabric, I mean, think about that. Consider before you spend a bunch of money on fabrics to get a small piece, and test that they are going to work together. If they're not in the same especially scrap quilting, you must run into this with scrap quilting, where the weight of the
Yeah.
fabric can make a difference. So,
Yeah, definitely.
yeah.
Definitely. And if, like you said, if it holds up decent, if it's, a little bit thinner,
Mm-hmm.
with not as much sizing, it will sew differently than
Mm-hmm.
one that has a lot of sizing in it. And
Yeah.
yeah, it makes a difference.
Yeah. And that's why this is a question we hadn't brought up, but wash or not wash your pre-washing. I don't pre-wash
Mhm.
any of my fabrics because I like the way the sizing holds the shape of the fabric while I'm working. Um, I think the pre-wash was way more important, even 15 years ago when the dyes in the industry weren't as stable as they are now. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
but,
I do not pre-wash either. It's more, I don't want to take the time. I don't want to,
and I just don't like working with the fabric afterwards. I mean,
yeah,
it is softer. It's more loosey goosey. It's more,
yeah,
it doesn't
yeah,
have, you don't have as much control over it. So,
yeah,
and
yeah.
the damn
So
strings.
I bought a kit about 5 years ago for a quilt, out of boutiques,
Mm,
and I bought it from the fabric designer,
mm-hmm,
and she told me to make sure to pre-wash because boutiques have more
mm-hmm,
dye in them, and it's got the potential to run.
mm-hmm.
Um, and I just got rid of that kit because I'm like, I'm
Ah,
not ever going to do it because I'm not going to pre-wash.
here's a
So
trick. If you have any fabric, you don't know if it's going to run or not, just cut a corner off, put it in a clear glass of water, and leave it overnight. The water's clear in the morning, it's not going to run. And if it's not, then you know that fabric will run. And you're going to
just
see,
room temperature water.
yeah, just
Just
throw it in there and let it sit in the water. If the dye doesn't come out in the water, it's going to be okay. But you're going to have that with reds, purples, and usually dark blues. Those are the three that are
yeah.
going to run on you. But that is a quickie test to see if you're going to have a problem. So yeah, don't get rid of the kit next time. I didn't know you 5 years ago.
It wasn't your kit. I promise you, it was
I
not
didn't
your
know you
kit.
5 years ago. I just want everyone to know it wasn't me.
So
Okay.
anyway, well, I think we covered quite a bit in this one.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I
We're gonna have to start
I
getting
feel
really
better about.
creative.
Pardon?
We're gonna have to start getting really creative. We're covering all the basics here. So
Oh, I've got a list. I have a list of questions for you, Heidi, a mile long. So,
well, it was when my
uh,
sister sent me a list. She's like, I'm just sitting here and I've got all these ideas for you. I'm like, okay, we're good.
mhm,
We got ideas for at least the year. We're good.
yep, yep.
So
So, but I'm glad we covered this because I do feel better about some of
mhm.
the habits that I thought were bad habits that I
Yeah.
had, and they're not quite as bad as I thought they were.
And hey, I'm
So,
going to tell you, there will be professional quilters out there that'll say, "Oh, Heidi, you have bad habits." I mean, just because we have the word professional in front of our name does not mean we know everything, for sure,
right, yeah,
definitely. But this is how I teach and what I've experienced, and
right.
hopefully some of that will help you guys. But if
And so my main thing is this is how I enjoy doing it, and
hmm
that's
yeah,
really what you should be doing. If you
hmm
enjoy being super precise and perfect and
hmm
that makes you happy,
hmm
then do that. If
yeah,
you enjoy, wonky blocks and scrappy and mismatched and whatever and you just enjoy the process, then do that. As
yeah,
long as you're enjoying what you're doing.
yeah,
That that's the main thing. So,
yeah. Enjoy the
yeah.
journey.
Yeah.
So, but the other thing is, if you are a perfectionist and it's going to make you crazy, take it out and redo it. I tell my
Mhm.
students that all the time. They're always like, should I take this out? Should I rip this? And I'm like, when it's done, sewn, quilted, and washed, are you going to notice that? And is it going to bother you? And if the answer
Right.
is yes, then you fix it. And you'd be amazed how many times the answer becomes no, because it really
Yeah.
isn't the end of the world. But
Yeah.
well, I think we did cover a lot. It may bring up lots of questions. So, again, leave us comments below. Let us know if there's any questions on what we covered or anything else you'd like to see us cover. Did we miss a special skill that you should master to improve your sewing? We would love to hear it. So
drop us a line.
Yes.
Follow, share, subscribe. Do all
Yes.
those things, please. It really helps us reach more quilters. And let
And
us
I
know
hope
if
you
you enjoy
guys are
it.
enjoying it as much as we are. So at least I'm enjoying it. I think Mary is too. So.
I very much am, yes.